Hello, my name is Ruben Esteban Diaz, and this is my presentation on species interaction on South Texas urban park habitats of Brownsville for Environmental Science, Section J. This is my community overview. A subtropical climate is located at the University of Texas, Brownsville, in the region near the Music Science and Learning Center. Numerous organisms and wildlife host species of flowers and plants, ranging from Texas palm trees to Madagascar periwinkles. The data was collected through photography, collecting pictures of creatures and different plant entities. The photos illustrated different species and types of species interactions, since the habitat was abundant with plenty of nutrients derived from plants which gained nourishment through sun and rain, of which sheltered, fed, and gave comfort to many different life forms. The vegetation in the environment is artificial, consisting of various saplings and mulch added to help preserve soil and the biodiversity of flora. There is a vast amount of non-native species like brown anal lizards, which were organisms that use predation as a type of interaction. This is a picture of the brown anal lizard, and these are my field notes. The picture of the brown anal lizard most likely represents an act of instinct and predatory behavior as the animal is chasing or observing future prey for its consumption. These are the different types of species interactions of what I encountered in the field. There was competition between Cape plumbago and Jatropha interrigima. There might not seem to be much species interaction, but both of these wildflowers species compete in every aspect. Resources are akin to susceptibility for any living organism, but these flowers compete for space held, water used for roots, soil, and even sunlight. And you can see a picture right underneath the paragraph, the first paragraph. Moving on. The brown anal lizard is an animal that uses predation based on the evidence of the ecosystem. Because of the subtropical climate in South Texas, there are many things to feast on. The species of the lizard diet includes an abundance of insects and water based on examination. It was caught in a photograph near the Music and Science Learning Center on the Brownsville UTRGV campus, looking for prey in between the cracks of the building near the vegetative life. And then we move on to the white pentas, which showed a species type of interaction by showing commensalism between itself and the mulch it was planted with, because the mulch has properties of distribution which in turn help the pentas absorb water and keep soil fertility balanced. Now we're going to the analytical side of the experiment based on species interaction that we conducted in the field. This is a data connection. The bar graph represents species richness and how the information correlates with the ecosystem of UTRGV Music Science and Learning Center at Brownsville. The bar graph below shows species richness, which there is hardly any of, and looks like there is a 1-to-1 ratio. You can now see on the right side of the bar graph, you will see the species richness. And you'll see what I mean by 1-to-1 ratio when I speak on the field notes. The bar graph does not do the environment's ecosystem justice because these are just the recorded statistics that were captured and not seen. Many other species of insects like bees, ants, and spiders were seen, but cannot be used as data because the photos could not be taken. The reason why there is a 1-to-1 ratio is because one picture of each organism was only recorded. There is not just one of these species planted or organized in a garden form. Many of the same species are planted next to each other, allowing for various species interactions. The hibiscus blue plumbago, white pentas interrigima, and the interrigima, and the brown anal lizard were chosen because of their diversity and relationships together. This is a continuation of data connection. As you can see, I cannot generate a pie graph or convert the bar graph into a pie graph. So instead, the substitution will be a bar graph showing the types of species interactions. And these are my field notes. The amount of species interactions based on the experiment were mainly composed of commensalism. The brown anal lizard was an organism that had predatory and predation interactions, presumably based on its nature and diet. Competition was intense among all plants and foliage. One can infer about what's under the soil, like earthworms, or what can be hidden in plain sight, like caterpillars. The strongest competition was between space, water, solar nutrients, and positioning, leaving a lasting impact for flowers and plants alike for the rest of their lives. Commensalism was rated fairly low, but there were multiple plants of which were by themselves that were not recorded benefiting from soil and mulch around them. The global connection between invasive species. The brown anal lizard is not native to Texas, and that is a fact. Whenever you search for inquiries regarding the subject as stated by researchers of the University of Florida, and I quote, "The brown anal is native to Cuba, the Bahamas, and other islands of the West Indies. It is not native to Florida, despite it being very common." Knowing this information, seeing how the species was found in South Texas, in Brownsville, it can accurately be assumed that it is an invasive species in North America. One can concur how these animals who roam very distant motherlands got here. Through trade, in the same article it is mentioned that they, I quote, were accidentally introduced to Florida and the Key West in the late 1800s, likely as stowaways on the cargo ships coming from Caribbean islands. Now, why does this information matter, you may ask? There are boundless consequences of environmental and societal impacts towards ecosystems, politics, and those who are conservationists, and appealing all of them is a difficult task. Take the cane toad, which are also an invasive species, but were brought because of goodwill and prosperity for a country's agricultural well-being. The government of Australia voiced concerns, and I quote, "Australia scoped out animals for eradicating the population of pest beetles who were terrorizing their agricultural industry. In the 20th century, that was a cane toad, which were native to the Americas." And I quote, "However, the Australian government has trouble with cane toads because of their toxicity and how they had no natural predators. What happens when an apex predator eats or attacks a cane toad is entirely different. The Australian government found that, and I quote, while some birds and native predators have learned to avoid the poison glands of adult toads, other predators are more vulnerable and die rapidly after ingesting toads. The introduction of invasive species, whether it be trade or because of wanting to take control of populations of harmful creatures, the outcome is the same. Factors of which disturb native biological life, making it difficult for industries to financially recover, countries to justify their actions, and society to cope on how and what to do with animals who have no say of their establishment. A continuation of the global connection between invasive species. The last point that is, if not by far the most important, how are invasive species being protected, regulated, and cared for? Countries get caught up in conflict, meaning they always have trouble communicating, cooperating, and allocating resources appropriately. There must not be any care left in the world and its land because politicians calling climate change, deforestation, and extinction a hoax, sourcing popular media outlets as a scapegoat. When are countries supposed to be able to adapt and evolve the regulations for nature and its species of life? How are national powers collecting data and contributing towards changing invasive species in their management? In an article posted by Lewis and Clark Law School, researcher Sadie Jacobs states, and I quote, "Current methods employed in controlling and eradicating invasive animals frequently are not successful and many cause stress, trauma, and suffering for the animals involved, which can impact animal welfare." And in my notes I state, "The procedures for apprehending invasive species and pests are boundless, and one of the many methods is the use of pesticides. For example, even just with a chemical deterrent, a farmer's crops are affected and sprayed with chemicals that are supposed to kill insects of which predators like birds of prey, prey upon. In scenarios where the birds eat exposed insects to pesticides, genetic deformities occur, and at that point the whole ecosystem changes, while enhancing chemicals for the deletion of pests. Animals in every category of the ecosystem get caught in a harmful crossfire." And this is my takeaway message. Species of any kind, whether it be invasive, native, or non-native, the correct way and progression is to take care of what we as a society hold, especially wildlife, because multiple species are going extinct, moved, and poached. That is why there are so many conservationist ideals and movements to show the globe that it takes a collective effort to inspire change. Poaching, climate change, and habitat conservation are lists that should be progressively questioned and answered. Habitat management can be as simple as hunting regulations, fewer carbon emissions, and for people to care. How are people supposed to care about the environment when the most wealthy people tear it down to carry fame and fortune? And these are my notes. There should be a clause in any legal agreement concerning the environment to have an exclusionary clause in order for the environment to be fully protected from deforestation, industrialization, and urbanization. And these are my works cited or references list. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed.